Well, my name is Dell Johnson. Welcome to the panel. This is the Diversity and Inclusion as Keys to Innovation and Ecosystem Development panel. I am a principal at Backstage Capital. We're a pre-seed and seed stage fund that's dedicated to funding companies started by underrepresented minorities. So we've so far funded 100 companies started by folks who are women, Black, Hispanic, Latinx, and or members of the LGBTQ community. So, today I'm going to ask our esteemed panelists some questions about diversity and inclusion and their own ways of building inclusive communities. But first, let's start with introductions. Please, we'll start with you, Clayton.
Well, thank you, and thank you to Sella for having us here. I've been able to participate with Sella for the last year or so, and it's just been an amazing experience. My name is Clayton Banks. I'm the CEO of Silicon Harlem, and the company does three key things. One, we are focused on digital literacy. We think that that is a leveling sort of way to help people get more parity. We also do a lot around broadband. We are closing the broadband gap. 40% of people in Harlem do not have broadband in the home. That's a tragedy.
Wow.
So we're fixing that. That is a wow. And then the third thing is we are committed to advanced technology research. We've been working on 5G for the past 2.5 years. A lot of you are hearing it a lot now, but we've been working on it for some time, and we've actually have Harlem now positioned as a community, as a platform, where a lot of our private sector and public sector are coming to try out new applications and services on platforms that we build in Upper Manhattan. So the community now is actually positioned to leapfrog in technology versus trailing in technology. Unprecedented. Over $50 million have been attracted over the last year and a half. So we're very excited about the trajectory that does. I don't care who's in Harlem, they're all going to benefit.
Excellent. Andy?
I'm Andy Saldaña. I'm the Executive Director of New York Tech Alliance. We are a nonprofit that works to create equity and access in the New York tech ecosystem. We're known for running the world's largest tech meetup, the New York Tech Meetup, which is the world's largest meetup group with over 61,000 members. Our everyday work is just creating the community of connections and collaborations, trying to make sure that the ecosystem represents New York as a whole.
Madelena?
Thanks everyone for being here and your interest in diversity and inclusion. My name is Madelena Mack. I'm the National Director of Startup Bus. Startup Bus is a tech entrepreneurship bootcamp and global championship on buses. And what we do is that we have been running for 10 years, and we put strangers, developers, designers on the bus, and they build startup in 3 days from scratch. So we've been covered by numerous media coverage from NBC News to TechCrunch and everything. And also our alumni community has raised more than $1 billion worldwide. So in the context of this panel, we work very hard on diversity and inclusion for the past few years during my tenure. So I raised the ratio of women and transgender gender non-conforming people from 20% to 40% over the past 3 years through our diversity fellowship program. So yeah, very good, very nice to be here.
Lena?
Yeah, Lena from Female Founders. We're a community for female startup founders in Austria, based in Vienna. And I am part of or head of our Accelerator program, but we do a lot of other things also, like a mentoring program, meetups, like doing demo days, and so on, and trying to raise the number of 12% female startup founders that we have in Austria and over Europe as a whole.
Thank you so much. My first question is for all of the panelists, and it's what has inspired you, just from a personal standpoint, to tackle this issue of diversity and inclusion, and why do you think that it's important for the purpose of building and developing tech ecosystems specifically?
I'll say that I actually started in the startup ecosystem when I started with New York Tech Meetup in 2013, and I had zero exposure to what it was to do entrepreneurship or work in a startup. And in those first 6 months, I was going to a lot of meetup groups and a lot of events, trying to get my footing in place, and kept feeling very, very out of place. I realized that I was one of the only brown people in the room. I was one of the only people who didn't come from Ivy League educated background. I felt very out of place as a queer man, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this can't be all that the community has to offer. So I started finding the groups that looked like me and that identified it, and I realized that once I found my footing in those places, it really helped acclimate me to the greater ecosystem. And I have to say the women's events that I was going to were definitely the most welcoming, inclusive, and definitely something I identified with. So I made sure to go to all the women's women in tech events that were happening. And so as I grew in my career, I decided that it needed to be at the center of what we do as we build a community for New York Tech Alliance, and as we do the work in every day. It doesn't have to be called out, but it should be a conscious part of what we do. And the companies that I put on stage, the representation that I select for each meetup, the kinds of programs that we partner with, all of that is because I want to make sure that whoever's in that room feels welcome.
I have to say, for me, it was kind of the same experience. So when we are at startup events in Austria and all over Europe, I would say that there are also like these 10% women, and it just doesn't feel really welcoming. So we said, okay, let's do one event where we are the majority, and then it just exploded because there was so much need for this, and we were like, wow, okay, we weren't prepared that so many people would come, and that there is such a huge need. And I think what is so important for me in this whole matter is that startups who apply and develop this future-shaping tech, they are so important in how we as a society also develop our future. And I think if only a small part of our society is developing and applying this technology, we are in risk that this future is not built for all of us. So it is really, really important to get all groups in, because otherwise we are at risk also in being let out in the future.
Well, obviously, the personal reason is that I definitely want people of my type, like people who are transgender, to be represented like myself. And obviously, like the idea of transgenderism is not exactly in the public mainstream until maybe 3 years ago. So 10 years ago, when I'm in the hackathon scene, it was very, very difficult to survive because everybody looked at me strangely. And with that said, right, the position of being the national director of Starbucks finds me more than I found it. And what I realized is that it's very rare for me to be in a position of power. And I think all of us here in this room are in a position of power, right? And that didn't come by often for me. And when I realized that, I'm very grateful to that. And I really want to figure out the best way to use my power for the greater good. So I look at what we had already had, right? We traveled to many different cities and connected many different tech hubs together. And we work already with a lot of economic development organizations that request us to have like certain amount of people who are from a diverse background. So when I came in, I look at everything, it's like, why not just put everything together and set up a real diversity program within our organization? And that was the first step that I took.
My inspiration, anyone grow up on a military base? Near one, okay. Me and Jolie. So I've seen the world the way it's supposed to be. Honestly, growing up where I grew up, my father's rank determined his salary, and his salary determined where we lived on the military base. Everyone in my neighborhood made the exact same amount of money. Everyone went to the same schools. Everyone basically went to the same commissaries. And at the very early part of my life, I never knew what somebody was. Like you're white, or you're black, or you're Irish, or you're Samoan, or you're Filipino. Because the military is made up of everything, and the only identity was, we're military. That was it. And so there was no sort of, I don't know, there just was no difference. And so at a very early age, I realized everybody's the same. There's smart people, there's dumb people, there's all types of things like that going on. And when my father retired and we moved out into civilian life, I really realized that, wow, somebody's really rich and somebody's really poor and somebody might not have a parent in the house. In my neighborhood, everyone had a mother and a father. So I realized I grew up privileged in a lot of ways. And when you see the sort of things that are wrong in our society, which are all made up in a bunch of social constructs that are developed, I went all in to try to change all of that, right? I was like, man, I'm gonna be at the front of the line and I'm gonna make sure everybody's the same and all this other stuff. And so joining this and joining that, and I remember I ended up working for President Clinton, and he would say all the time that intelligence is distributed everywhere evenly. Access and exposure is not. So I kept that in my DNA as I went on to fight for rights and all types of things. But as where I'm at now in my life is I realize that it's exactly right. All we need to do is try to get as much access and exposure as many people as we possibly can. I've had a lot of it. I'm not going to even front. I've been very blessed that way. And I believe everyone should get that same sort of shot. Then it's up to that person to be motivated to take the best advantage of it. So when we talk about diversity, we talk about inclusion, they're nice words to throw out, but it's the action that really matters.
So let's talk about action and access a little bit, because there are a lot of different startup programs, accelerators, incubators, venture funds, et cetera, out there. And they almost universally say that they have a problem, and that's getting diverse founders into their pipelines. So how do you think about that? How have you built organizations that can reach out to folks in underrepresented communities, and what are some things that other people who are thinking about this issue seriously, what could they do?
Okay, I start on that. I would say partner up with organizations that have the access to these communities and really make an effort. I think it's not that hard to get founders in that are more diverse if you really make an effort, and then you really have to think through who is your target audience, who do you want to have. I can give an example from our program. For example, we wanted to have a relocation accelerator program for startup founders from all over Europe that could also come to Vienna for like three months. And then we found out, okay, we want to target women. Every woman that is or 90% of the women who are older than 30 and they have a child, they can't be part of our program. This is something we found out in the first week, and this is something every accelerator program should think about. What are the resources and the capacities for the people I want to reach and I want to get in? And then I need to change the framework accordingly, also like money-wise, expense-wise, and so on.
Yeah, so the way that I see it is the framework and also the founding team. That the team that reaches out for the network is what matters, right? I think that it requires some sort of humility to really understand that there's a need for diversity and inclusion. So being aware that your organization has a problem, that's great, that's fantastic. But also the second thing that needs to be aware of that is that, well, maybe part of our team is also part of the problem as well. And having that humility to really understand that and knowing that and then take steps to correct it. And that's important. And not just doing that because that they need to understand what diversity and inclusion is actually about. So the first thing is really just to learn what's out there, like being here and listening to this panel, for example, reading more up about what diversity and inclusion really means. And there's a part in terms of the founding team is that who you have in a team directly affects what the network that you're going to build, right? There's a networking effect. So if your team is entirely composed of a monogamous group of people, you need to realize that you need to at least start including other people and for the team in order to build a network. So start building a better team, include more people in the team, understand what diversity and inclusion really means, and reach out to partners to start building and start networking. And that's the only way to build a pipeline, is to improve your own team first before realizing that the rest of the pipeline is a problem.
So I'm going to follow that, and hopefully you guys don't hate me when I say some of the stuff I say, but I have a different perspective on a few things. So one of them is 1993, I raised $30 million to launch a network. It was just a freaking good idea that I had. It was like a really good idea, you know, it was Sega Channel. And I'm saying that because you asked about investors particularly, and sort of the lack of investment that sometimes goes into these, these ID-based communities that you're talking about. And I'm saying, I believe that most money, at least most money, is going to a great idea, not to a great person. They want people to be great, no question about it, but it's a great idea that if you don't invest in a great idea, that's your problem, not the person who's presenting it. So what we have to do is look at perhaps some of the things that get funded that don't deserve it. I mean, that's another issue. But I believe that the way that we start to make this clear that fund great ideas is to make sure, you know, people are given that litmus test, not who are you necessarily. It's like watching The Voice, right? No, you don't even get to see the people. You just hear their voice and you go, hey, turn around. Oh, well, I didn't know, you know. So I think and also I think, you know, I'm just trying to demystify this a little bit. Like, I know, everybody ever heard of Jessica Matthews? The young lady who created the socket ball that creates energy and all this other stuff. She's raised more money than every woman in history and most men. I mean, because she has a freaking good idea. It's like a real wonderful thing that she's doing. She's re-engineering energy. So some of us have to really step up and say, what's that great idea that I have that I want to put out there? Someone's going to fund it. I know a lot of my quote-unquote white friends that don't get funding either because they don't have a good idea or the model doesn't work. So I'm not saying there isn't racism and all that stuff in the system, but I am saying that you as an individual should come up with that great idea. Someone will fund it. Someone will fund it. Or like the lady who was on the previous panel who said, get a customer. That's what I did with Silicon Harlem. We went out and got customers. So we're a for-profit. A lot of people think we're a nonprofit because I certainly lead with my heart, but I'm a shark in the tank. So we definitely have revenue and business models to where we didn't have to go out and beg anybody for any money. We have so people are asking us now, can they invest in us? I get a call every other month. Hey, you guys want some money? You need some money? And we love that position.
I just want to add, I think also demystifying what entrepreneurship is, demystifying like what it is to be a small business owner and what it is to grow a business. I think a lot of people see the startup ecosystem, Silicon Valley, the tech companies that are being created, and they're like, oh, I can't ever do that. But why are we not holding up the small business owners in our own neighborhoods? I looked at my family when I started in this ecosystem. I was like, oh my gosh, my family is full of entrepreneurs. I had an aunt that made tamales for half of Houston and, you know, out of her house. And she was super successful her entire life. And I didn't even connect the dots that she was a true entrepreneur. And so I think if we're able to demystify what that means, it'll really elevate more people to have confidence to put up their ideas in front of people.
Okay, next and maybe last question, but we'll see. A lot of these panels focus on the concept of diversity, but we never really get into the inclusion aspect. So, you know, folks will get a diverse team or semi-diverse team, and then everyone on that team leaves, or there's no support if it's a startup and they don't go on to the next round, or they don't drop out of a program because they feel like they're not supported from a cultural perspective. How do you, in your programs, ensure that inclusion piece is there, that folks feel valued and feel like they have ownership in your communities or in your programs over their own situations?
Well, for us, you know, Nike has this great slogan, right? Just do it. So I'm into this new one. If you don't remember anything else I say today, try to remember this. Do it together. That's the essence of inclusion. Do it together. And one of the things we've done in Silicon Harlem is we try to focus on 5 key voices. One, we actually respect our electives. So we keep them very informed of what we're doing, and we want their voice and want to hear from them on how they look at the future of our community. The second one is academics. A lot of people overlook that, and most of you probably don't realize there's 12 colleges in Harlem. You hear what I said? That's more than a lot of states in this country. 12 colleges in Harlem. So we have a pipeline already there. So we keep the academics a part of our conversation. Third is our stakeholders. If you ever come up to Harlem, you'll see the Harlem Hospital, which is a major hospital in this city. The Schomburg, which is one of the greatest libraries in the country. We've got the YMCA, the police stations. We've got everything we need, and those stakeholders are important on how they serve the community. Fourth, we look at the private sector, the Microsofts. We got our first billion-dollar company put a location in Harlem, WeWork, in 2016. That wasn't like accidental. We begged them to come up. I was going down to WeWork for years, and finally we got one up in Harlem. The most diverse and always sold out WeWork in their footprint. And lastly, of course, the individual citizens. Very critical to hear from the people. So if any of you have the opportunity, you set up a little community board or something just to hear their voice. In our neighborhood, we hear 4 things that have nothing to do with anything that we're talking about, right? Hey, Clayton, there's too much noise in this neighborhood. Hey, Clayton, I don't like to see the garbage on the streets of Harlem. Hey, Clayton, we need more affordable housing. And then fourth is, of course, tied to the garbage. There's too much vermin. I see a rat. So if we're not addressing those type of issues, or if we're not listening to the community and not know that we should be addressing those issues, then we're all failing. So we feel that you have to have all those voices to the table to truly create an inclusive set of solutions to solve those systemic problems and make sure that's sustainable.
I definitely agree on that. Well, listening to the people, communicate, and constant feedback, I think is the most important in our methodology. And by listening, really is hear what they're saying, not trying to talk back, not trying to fight back, really see what their concerns are and really take notes on it and really see where the pain points are and what are the things that we can improve upon. Different communities that we work with have different kind of pain points, and we need to be constantly aware of that, but because we work with many different communities. So from our perspective, I think that's the constant feedback, listening. We treat it like a user experience design almost.
Yeah, I think constant feedback and understanding what you don't know, checking your privilege, understanding that you don't have all the answers.
Key.
And being open to listening to different perspectives. It's all very important. Also, low barrier to entry, because not everybody has the same background or the same training, and the easier you make the communication, the more communication you're going to get.
Would agree on these points, and also make sure that the feedback we are getting is kind of honest. So we try to make it anonymous, all these things that you don't try to get the nice words, but you really get what they really think about the program and how they feel.
How do you do that?
Anonymous, what is that, surveys?
Survey.
There's actually a new startup, Pluto.life, that is trying to solve this issue for companies, and they have a really fantastic UX intake form that it's kind of like a story at Mad Libs thing, and so all the employees just fill it out, and the honest answers that they're getting from it and the feedback and data that they're gathering from those experiences is phenomenal. I think it's something that a lot of people should adopt, and beyond companies, maybe we're looking at participating in some way.
Okay, well, we're at time right now, but I wanted to give thanks to our panelists, and let's give them a round of applause, please. And if you want to continue talking about this, I know I'll be around for an hour or two, so feel free to talk to me, and I'm sure other people would like to talk about this as well. Thank you so much.